Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the financial planning podcast for parents who are senior level professionals with kids in school or college. If you're tired of stitching together 4 different specialists to run your financial life, you're in the right place. I'm Paul Fenner, certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and founder of TAMMA Capital. I also have 4 kids, including a set of triplets, so I know the pace. Let's get into today's conversation.
Hi, and welcome back. I was having a conversation with a couple a few weeks ago, and we were going through their financial picture, and at some point, the wife looked at me and said, "We should be fine, right? I mean, we make good money." And the honest answer was, I don't know yet, because good money is a fact. We should be fine. Well, that's a story. And those are 2 very different things. Morgan Housel put it this way: the best story wins. Who has the right answer, but I ignore because they're inarticulate. And what do I believe is true, but is actually just good marketing? I keep coming back to these 2 questions because in the work with my families, I see this pattern constantly. Smart, accomplished people whose financial lives are running on a story instead of a plan. And the scariest part is the story usually sounds pretty darn convincing. So let me give you a few examples of a family I'll call the Brennans. Not the real names. They came in last year, both in senior roles, combined income north of $350,000. Most people would trade places with them in a heartbeat. They had 3 kids, 2 of them which are in high school, approaching college. So on paper, they looked like they had it all figured out. Good savings rate, maxing out 401ks, 529s, nice house, and a good school district. But here's what I found when I actually started pulling everything together. 2 employer retirement plans, neither of them had reviewed since enrollment. A brokerage account opened years ago that was running on autopilot by an advisor who only sees the investment piece of what they have. And a tax preparer who just files but doesn't do any tax planning. The strategy was non-existent because no one was coordinating any of it. None of it. And the story they've been telling themselves, we have professionals handling this. That story felt true. It sounded responsible, but it was, to borrow Morgan's framing, good marketing. Because the reality was no one was handling it, because no one had a complete picture. And I'm not immune to this. Teresa and I are not immune to this. We wrestle with something very similar, just from a different angle. You know, we're in the thick of raising these 4 kids. The triplets are 15, Max 13. And sometimes the story I catch myself telling is, we'll figure this out after the spring sports season or whatever sports season that we're in. The estate plan details, long-term care conversations, the financial coordination between what I'm building here at TAMMA and our personal lives. I know better. I literally do this for a living. But the story, not now, later, is so comfortable that it almost works. That's how powerful these stories are. They don't have to be true. They just have to be easy to believe. And here's what I've learned sitting across from families for, it's hard to say this still, 2 decades. The most expensive financial mistakes are rarely about picking the wrong investments or missing a market move. They're about the stories that go unexamined. We earn enough, so we must be fine. That's a story. Earning well and being financially coordinated are 2 completely different things. I've worked with families earning $400,000 a year who are more fragile than families earning $180,000 because the higher earners had let complexity accumulate without anyone managing it. Families like us do this. That's a story. The private school, the second car, the annual vacations, they develop more into an obligation than a choice. These become the things you have to do, not because you decided they align with what matters most, but because the story says so. We'll get to it when things slow down. That's a story. But things don't slow down. You and I both know that. Not at the director level you may be at, the VP level, managing a manufacturing plant, dual careers, multiple kids on the schedule. The estate plan doesn't get updated because there's never a good week to do it. The financial coordination conversation doesn't happen because both spouses are too exhausted by Thursday to sit down and talk about money. And here's a part of Morgan's quote that really gets me. Who has the right answer, but I ignore because they're inarticulate? For a lot of families I work with, that's their spouse. One partner keeps saying, I think we need to sit down and look at all this. The other one hears it as nagging or anxiety. But the person saying it is usually right. They're just not saying it in a way that has the financial language to explain what's bothering them, if you will. They just feel it. That quiet sense that no one is actually steering the ship. Sometimes it's a CPA or tax preparer who mentions something about tax planning in passing that got lost in the noise of April. Sometimes it's a gut feeling that the financial plan from 4 years ago now doesn't match how we're actually living today. The right answer is often quiet. The wrong story is usually loud. So one thing that you can try is to write down 3 financial stories you tell yourself the most often. This is not your financial plan, not your portfolio. These are stories. The things you say to yourself or your spouse when the topic of money comes up. Things like, we're fine, or we'll deal with that later, or someone is handling it. Then ask yourself Morgan's 2 questions. Is there something I believe is true that's actually just a comfortable narrative? And is there a voice, maybe my spouse, maybe in my own head, that has the right answer, but I keep ignoring because it's not loud enough? Because the first step to writing a better story is realizing you've been living in one. So if this conversation hits close home to you, like it has for many families, and including my own, you're not alone. And if you're ready to trade the story for the actual picture, I'm pretty easy to find on TAMMAcapital.com. And remember, money is a number, enough is a story. Make sure you're writing your own. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time.
Now for the fine print. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not personalized financial, tax, or legal advice. Before making any decisions about your specific situation, please work with a qualified professional. TAMMA Capital is a registered investment advisor.